Health plans in the forefront of managed health care, offering a wide range of solutions for businesses both large and small.
Good evening. I'm Roger Mudd in New York.
And I'm Jim Lehrer in Washington. After our summary of the news this Friday, we look at the work of the Budget Conference Committee. White House Counselor David Gergen reacts to that and other matters. Mark Shields, joined tonight by Bill Kristol, then analyze him and the politics on Capitol Hill. We close with a flood update from Kansas City and a report on cancer-detecting genes.
Major funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ATM, supermarket to the world. And by New York Life. Yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. Funding has also been provided by PepsiCo. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
House and Senate negotiators are near agreement on a budget plan. They agreed to raise the federal gasoline tax by 4.3 cents per gallon late last night. Budget Director Leon Panetta and Treasury Secretary Lloyd Bentsen met with congressional leaders on Capitol Hill about the final details this afternoon. President Clinton's goal was to reduce the deficit by $500 billion over 5 years through tax increases and spending cuts. Press Secretary Dee Dee Myers predicted the conferees would reach about $490 billion in deficit reduction. She said, by any measure, that's a victory. Senate Republicans were forced to abandon their filibuster of the president's national service legislation today. Enough Republican senators defected from the week-long filibuster to force a final vote. That vote is scheduled for Tuesday. The bill would allow young people to work off college costs by performing community service. The Senate Labor Committee voted today to confirm Dr. Joycelyn Elders as Surgeon General of the United States. The vote was 13-4. All 4 no votes came from Republicans. The nomination now goes to the full Senate, where more Republican opposition is expected because of her views on abortion and sex education. Roger?
The federal flood relief bill, which left the House as a $3 billion package, today emerged from the Senate Appropriations Committee as an almost $5 billion deal. The increase was the result of President Clinton's promises to 6 Midwestern governors who had lobbied for more federal help. The bill now goes to the full Senate, where it's expected to be approved next week. The surging waters of the Missouri River have now cut a path through the center of Missouri and knocked out nearly every bridge from St. Louis to Kansas City. The only one still open is the Interstate Route 70 bridge in the middle of the state. Short trips that normally took minutes now take hours. A railroad bridge in Glasgow, Missouri collapsed when the raging waters of the Mississippi knocked out 2 of the bridge's trestles. The strong currents hurled pieces of the span against another bridge that was already closed.
In economic news today, the Commerce Department reported 3 June results. Personal income of Americans was unchanged after 6 months of increases. Consumer spending rose 0.6% over the previous month, and new home sales surged 11% to the second highest level in almost 4 years. Sales were up in all parts of the country except the West.
Bosnia's 3 warring factions agreed today to split the republic into 3 separate states, a plan that could bring an end to their 17-month-old civil war. The agreement came during peace talks in Geneva. International mediators reacted cautiously to the news. European community mediator Lord Owen was asked whether he thought it would bring an end to the fighting.
Who knows? Sorry to be so enigmatic, but basically I've been here before. We had a settlement in Athens, and it blew apart. I think we have got to be very cautious about predicting whether or not there is a total overall settlement here. There are still quite a lot of issues that have to be negotiated, not least the most divisive issue of all, which is the map.
Owen said the leaders would continue their talks tomorrow to discuss the map and just how Bosnian territory will be divided. Today's agreement followed word that the U.S. was considering airstrikes to stop the Serb bombardment of Sarajevo. In Washington, the House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Lee Hamilton said today, The U.S. was consulting with its allies on the plan, which would be a major expansion in the proposed use of Western air power in Bosnia. Until recently, U.S. officials said the planes would only attack if UN peacekeepers were fired on.
Muslim guerrillas made a ceasefire proposal today to end the Israeli bombardment of South Lebanon. The offensive has killed nearly 120 people, wounded nearly 500, and forced hundreds of thousands to flee some 80 towns and villages in the region. We have a report narrated by David Simmons of Worldwide Television News.
It was the 6th day of Israel's military operation to flush out Hezbollah guerrillas from southern Lebanon, and Israeli forces continued their offensive in the self-declared security zone. Tanks blasted hills and abandoned villages in attacks which have already caused some 300,000 Lebanese to flee their homes. Fighter jets also targeted Shiite villages in both the south and east of Lebanon, leaving telltale plumes of smoke drifting across the hillsides. The Lebanese port of Tyre was among the places worst hit. Here, the Israeli target was a refugee camp allegedly housing a Palestinian guerrilla base. But official sources say civilians have borne the brunt of the attacks. Many settlements in South Lebanon have been devastated by the unrelenting bombardment. In the town of Nabatea, the rubble was a silent witness to attacks from which most of the population had fled. Some of the refugees found shelter in damaged buildings in Beirut, near what used to be the Green Line dividing the city. But Israel maintained that its objectives were limited.
The operation in Lebanon is not a war, and we do not intend to carry it into a war. It is an operation of a limited purpose, and the minute the Hezbollah will stop shelling the northern part of Israel, the operation will be over.
Several more guerrilla rockets were fired at Israel today, but they caused no casualties. 2 U.S. jets may have mistakenly fired on Iraq anti-aircraft sites yesterday. The Navy jets attacked 2 sites about 90 minutes apart after the pilots thought they had been illuminated by Iraqi targeting radar. A U.S. official told Reuters news agency the surveillance was not as threatening as the pilots believed.
That ends our summary of the day's top stories. Ahead on the NewsHour, budget negotiations on Capitol Hill. White House advisor David Gergen, political analyst Mark Shields, and William Crystal. The flood's impact on the nation's transportation system, and detecting breast cancer. Our lead story tonight, the budget negotiations that are near completion. Members of a House-Senate conference say they found a way to iron out some major and minor differences between the 2 budget bills passed earlier this year. The question now is whether the congressional cleaning and pressing has created some new wrinkles that might ruin the entire suit and, in turn, the presidential wardrobe. We have a Kwame Holman backgrounder.
With Republicans pledged to watch from the sidelines, the job of working out differences between House and Senate versions of the president's budget fell solely on the Democrats. And when conferees first gathered 2 weeks ago, they knew they had a threefold mission. Keep enough of the social programs contained in the House bill to hold liberal support. Keep energy taxes low, like they are in the Senate bill, to hold on to the conservatives. And still try to hit a 5-year deficit reduction target of $500 billion to please President Clinton.
It becomes an arithmetic problem at some point. And that's really basically what it is.
But late this afternoon, Democratic leaders from the House and Senate said they were very close to doing what they had been sent to do.
I hope so.
Democrats had little room to maneuver when negotiations between the 2 chambers began. The House version of the president's plan passed by only 6 votes, and in the Senate, Vice President Al Gore had to cast the tie-breaking vote.
And the bill, H.R. 2264, is passed.
The conferee's biggest obstacle was the size of an energy tax. The House had approved bringing in $72 billion with the so-called BTU tax. But last night, conferees opted for the 4.3 cents a gallon gas tax increase contained in the Senate bill. That gas tax increase might just be small enough to hold the vote of Senator Herbert Kohl of Wisconsin, who vowed to vote no if the tax went any higher. It also might hold the vote of Senator Max Baucus of Montana, who went jogging this morning with President Clinton, another indication that the White House is going all out trying to accommodate those members sitting on the fence. But it appears the compromise budget won't accommodate Senator Dennis DeConcini of Arizona, who voted against the president's plan the first time it came through the Senate, and who says he's still inclined to vote no.
I'm not going to vote for this one unless I'm convinced, and you're convinced, the press is convinced that it really reduces the deficit. And right now, the package, as I know it to be, and I have not seen it, doesn't satisfy that.
Although the details of the package haven't yet been announced, it's expected to resemble only slightly the plan President Clinton first announced back in February. Aside from the 4.3 cents a gallon increase in the federal gas tax, the bill would increase the top individual income tax rate from 32 to 36%, with a 10% surtax on incomes over $200,000. The top corporate tax rate would increase from 34 to 35%, and the bill would increase from 50% to 85% the portion of Social Security benefits subject to tax for individuals earning above $32,000 a year and couples earning above $40,000. And it appears that liberals, particularly members of the Congressional Black Caucus, might have to live with a smaller increase in tax credits for low-income workers and in food stamps, and bigger cuts in Medicare spending. And the president himself might have to settle for something closer to $490 billion in deficit reduction instead of his familiar target of $500 billion. His spokesperson said today the president could live with that.
As you know, there were several attempts to move from a target of $500 billion to something like $400 billion, and the president stood his ground. He was committed to getting close to $500 billion in deficit reduction. He got 98% of the way there. We think when the deal is done and the dust settles, that it will be roughly 98%.
Negotiators say they expect to finish the conference committee's work sometime this evening.
Now, a newsmaker interview with White House counselor David Gergen. He had worked for Republican presidents Nixon, Ford, and Reagan, and was editor-at-large of U.S. News and World Report and a political analyst here on the NewsHour when President Clinton brought him into his inner circle 9 weeks ago. David Gergen, welcome back.
It's good to see you, Jim.
So the president is pleased with this budget deal?
Well, if it emerges the way it's shaping up, he will be pleased with it. I think he will. I think he feels that it meets his basic goals, the goals he's been fighting for the last several months. He's been fighting for $500 billion. We've got a deal that's shaping up. It's very close to $500
$490.
$490. It's he's been fighting for a plan that he felt it was very important that the taxes that were in this plan fall largely upon the well-to-do, and about 80% of the taxes here do fall upon people making over $200,000 a year. He felt it was important to have a balance between spending cuts and tax increases, and it's about half and half between those two, in his judgment. And there are also some incentives in here. There's some incentives for small business, as well as a program for the working poor, this Earned Income Tax Credit program, a program that, in fact, has been sponsored or supported by Republicans in the past, as well as Democrats, will mean that working families with children will no longer be poor when the program fully kicks in. So that there are a variety of elements to the program, Jim, that he feels meet his basic objectives, and he'll fight for it. I tell you, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough vote once this comes out of conference, and it still hasn't come out yet. It's going to be a very tough vote.
Tough in the House?
I think there's a little sense of movement in the right direction in the House, but if the conference bill starts moving too far south in terms of lowering the number of benefits or the incentives in the programs, like
lose the liberals.
You could wind up losing the liberals. And this is a very tough balancing act in the sense of trying to get a program which more conservative folks feel cuts spending enough, and the more liberal folks feel also does some things for people in the inner cities and does some things for other kind of incentives for empowerment zones and that sort of thing.
Now, in the Senate, it's the conservatives who are the problem. Is that right?
I would say that, well, the people who call themselves, I suppose the Republicans will say they're the true conservatives. They're not the problem.
I'm talking about the conservative. All right, conservative Democrats. We'll talk about the Republicans in a minute.
The moderate conservatives, I think, obviously are the problem. And some people, this is not easy politics for a lot of people who were up in 1994. It's very, very hard for Washington to break bad habits. This is a town that's always had an adding machine, has a very hard time cutting spending. a town that's addicted to more and more spending. So when you start cutting spending, they're asking people to raise taxes. It's tough politics. So you got some folks who are up in 94 in the Senate side who are not, they're a little scared about that. And you've got some other people, David Boren, for example, who voted yes in an earlier version of this, who would prefer to have a different kind of program. This isn't something, he's not interested in tinkering on the edges of this particular program. He'd like to go into a bipartisan summit, for example, with Senator Dole. But I still think that when all is said and done, I'll be very surprised if any Republican votes, but when all is said and done, I would assume the Democrats who are now wavering, and there are several in the Senate who are wavering, as they look over that cliff and they look down over the precipice, they're going to decide that they'd rather vote for this program, not just because it's a Democratic president, but I think there's also a considerable fear that the financial markets would react very badly if the program were to go down, that interest rates would spike up and you could throw the country into recession if you're not careful.
Why is President Clinton having so many problems with the people who are supposedly from the same wing of his own party? In other words, it's the conservative and moderates who supposedly got him where he is, and they're the ones who are leaving him now that he's in trouble.
Well, I think from his perspective, this has not been easy for a couple of reasons. It's asking for people to give up bad habits. And secondly, he has not had Republican support for this. And when Ronald Reagan was president and came forward with his economic program in 1981, he had a fair amount of Democratic support. He had Democratic support for a lot of programs. When George Bush passed his, when the 1990 budget deal went through, a lot of Republicans went overboard, went the other way, but a lot of Democrats voted for him. And so it's not been easy having to work entirely within your own party. I think there were some moderate Republicans at one time the White House thought might be willing to come over, but there's been a great deal of discipline within that party, and a lot of their caucuses have put pressure on people to stick.
And they have. What is the thing that's made them stick? Because this is very unusual for something like this, for not to be one vote from the other party.
Well, I think a couple of things. Clearly, there are philosophical differences on aspects of this plan. There's no question about that. I don't think we ought to, I'd be fair about it. I have been disturbed, as you know, by the degree of partisanship in the city right now, and I don't think it's limited to Republicans. That it seems to me that everybody's now viewing things about who's going to win, who's going to lose, as opposed to sort of thinking what's best for the country's economy. There are a lot of Republicans, frankly, who have voted for programs similar to what's in this bill in the past. When I was in the Reagan White House, we passed a 5-cent increase in the gasoline tax. At that time, the federal gasoline tax was 4 cents. And with Republican help, Ronald Reagan got a 5-cent increase in the gasoline tax. So it's a lot of the same Republicans who are opposing the 5 cent of gasoline.
But why? What's the difference?
Well, I suppose it's important to ask them, and we'll have a chance to,
But haven't you all talked to them? Haven't you tried to get their votes? They claim that as you know, they claim that they were told this isn't for you, and they were never involved in this. Is that true?
I was on the other side with Mark Shields earlier. As a journalist, I felt that both sides were not talking enough to each other. I felt that the White House at that time, in the early going, was not spending enough time trying to build a bipartisan base. I thought that the Republicans at that time were refusing to play a bipartisan game. I thought both sides should play closer together. And I will say this, I think what you will see in the future, particularly as we head into the fall on health care and again on NAFTA, there will be more bipartisan spirit in the city. At least I certainly hope so. There are a lot of Republicans, for example, who will support the president on NAFTA. This is a trade agreement with Mexico. But in this particular fight, it has gotten very divided. And the parties, the truth is that Bill Clinton is winning the great majority of Democratic votes. He is winning a lot more Democratic votes than George Bush won Republican votes for the 1990 deal. He's winning a lot more Democratic votes than Mr. Kasich, the House Republican, who when he introduced his plan in the House, he lost 40 Republicans. He lost about a quarter of his Republicans. He lost a lot of people. Bill Clinton is doing better among Democrats than Republicans have done among Republicans, but still, it's still very, very close.
How close is it? I mean, is it conceivable that the Senate might not accept this conference committee report and to throw the whole thing out?
Sure.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think the chances are?
Jim, that's not your normal kind of question of 1 to 10.
I know, okay.
See, well, let me just say this. I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's look. It was the tie was broken last time by the vice president. We have 1 or 2 people who said yes last time in the earlier version of this bill, who may go the other way. We have one or two people who may come toward the president, perhaps more. I think it's going to be tough, but I will tell you this. The president is optimistic, remains optimistic, because he feels that when people look at what's important for the country, not what's important for his presidency or the Democratic Party, what's important for the country in terms of keeping this economy going. This economy is still not out of the woods yet. Keeping this economy going, that it's important to get this plan. Every time there are problems with this plan up on the Hill, interest rates spike up, long-term interest rates spike up. We've seen it a couple of times in the past already, and there's a real danger if they don't pass this plan that you're going to see the interest rates spike up. You're going to see the stock market take a tumble. You're going to see things slow down, and I just don't think Democrats are prepared to take that chance. I think they will want to come in and say, look, even the Democrats who may disagree with the president, there are a lot of Democrats who agree with it. There are a lot of Democrats who are very enthusiastic about this plan, or at least think it has elements that they very much support. But the Democrats who still disagree with him will say in the end, I think, look, at least he's had the courage, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for this. He's had the courage to spend his political capital on something he thought was important. That's not something with all due respect, Mark and I used to have this, to talk about this a lot. I often felt that one of the problems in the last administration was that George Bush had a lot of political capital, but wasn't willing to spend it on domestic renewal or reform. He could put it in the bank and not do it. Bill Clinton at least has had the courage to say, I believe in deficit reduction. I believe in straightening out this economy. I'm willing to spend some of my political capital. He's down some in the polls. Think how high he'd be if he never asked to do anything tough. He'd be a lot higher today. He'd be well over 50%, might be at 60 or 70%. If he everything he said was, well, we'll just go along with the status quo and make people feel good, massage people's egos and that sort of thing. I think he's had the courage to do this, and I think a lot of people understand waiting.
On another issue, David, there was a front-page story in the Washington Post this morning that says White House officials, including you, made a decision to withhold for 24 hours this note that was found in the briefcase of Vincent Foster, the deputy White House counsel who took his own life. What's the story there?
Well, there was a torn-up piece of paper was found which had notes from Vincent Foster on Monday night around 5 o'clock Washington time. At the time, the president was in Chicago. Mac McClarty, the chief of staff, was in Chicago with the president. I happened to be in Chicago. There was a call placed by the counsel at the White House after they discovered this to Mr. McClarty, asking how to proceed. As McClarty came to talk to me about it, we talked it over, and it was our view at the time that this would have to be turned over to the proper legal authorities. And both of us agreed.
Justice Department,
whoever we thought the Justice Department at the time.
Correct.
But we also wanted to have a chance to see it and have a chance to talk, and we thought there probably had to be a couple of people who had to be consulted about it. So we came back, had a meeting the next morning. There was universal agreement among the president's senior advisors that had to be turned over. But we thought there were two parties that were as important to tell and to notify before. One was the widow, and she happened to be on a plane back from Little Rock that day. And we thought it was only the decent thing to do was make sure she had a chance and knew what was involved before we turned it over. The second was the president. And he happened to be a very busy day that day. The very first time we got to him was 6 o'clock that night to have a real conversation about it. And the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General were in the White House at 7 o'clock that night. Within an hour, we talked to the president, we wanted to say, here is the material. Is that straightforward? Now, we thought we were doing the right thing. We thought we were notifying the proper people and turning it over promptly. We did not want that day to pass without turning it over. And that's why we had this meeting at 7 o'clock that night.
But, so from your perspective, White House perspective, you did nothing wrong. There's no mishandling of this thing in any way.
We have no apologies about it. I think that we remain concerned about what's right for the widow. This was not a suicide note as such. It's undated, it's unsigned, it's not addressed to anybody. In reading it, the passages suggest...
Have you read it? Have you read the note?
I have. I've read it. Well, there was a copy made of. I've read that. And the note does not lead you to conclude that this is someone who would take his life. Rather, it is an argument about why someone might resign. And if you read the note, you would say, therefore, I am leaving the White House. It did bear on his state of mind. It did show a depressed state about his job. It was entirely job-related. He clearly was unhappy. He was a very unhappy man about what was happening around him. This is a man who had a brilliant career, came to Washington, and for a variety of reasons found this a very tough city. And that's something, we've talked about before. And this is a tough city for a lot of people. He was under, I think he took some unfair knocks, frankly. And he was depressed about it. And I wish he'd taken a different, I think all of us are very sad about that. But I think, Jim, our feeling is that we have done the right thing. We have nothing. We have no reason to say And we've told the park police, I've been involved in this in the last 24 hours very deeply, we told the park police, you come talk to anybody you want to. We said, anybody you want to look at it, just come talk. We'll talk through about the note, about the circumstances, everything like that. We want to get this, play this by the book in terms of making sure that all the answers are made available.
All right. David Gergen, thank you. Don't go away. We want to go now to his former analyst partner on this program, syndicated columnist Mark Shields. He's joined for some regular Friday night analysis by William Crystal, the former chief of staff of Vice President Quayle. He's now director of the Bradley Project, a survey of political, social, and economic trends of the 1990s. Let's start where we ended and then work back. Mark, what are your thoughts on how the White House has handled the aftermath of the Vincent Foster tragedy?
Well, not good. I think you can make the case that there was a concern, a dual track of personal consideration for the widow, which is totally understandable. You have personal feelings here, not only a friend of the president's, but a friend and colleague of the First Lady's. You have past financial ventures together. But it's come out too much in drips and drabs. The idea that the president spoke to him by phone on the night before Vince Foster took his life, talked about inviting him over for a movie, and the president said he made the call with Webb Hubbell there. Webb Hubbell was Associate Attorney General, another law partner of Vince Foster's and Hillary Rodham Clinton's from Little Rock, and he had spent the previous weekend with Vince Foster and Mrs. Foster, Mr. and Mrs. Hubbell had, trying to cheer him up at the importuning insistence of Mrs. Foster, who was concerned about her husband. Well, the president then went on to say that he wasn't aware of the fact that Vince Foster was depressed. It just seems unlikely that he's sitting there with the man who's just spent the weekend with Vince Foster. He places a call to Vince Foster, talks to him for 20 minutes, and somehow wasn't aware of the fact that he was making the call, invite him to a movie, that the call had nothing to do with the president's sense that Foster was upset. I mean, there are questions that continue to nag.
Yeah, are you still nagged by any questions on this, Bill?
Well, I think we need to know, at some point, presumably we'll have an independent report by some authority with some independence who's willing to put his or her name, I suppose, if it's the Attorney General, to it, saying what happened, what we can know about what happened, and assuring us that there's nothing that the public needs to know about the particular causes of the depression that,
What does the public need to know about this?
Well, if there are work-related causes of what led him to his suicide, that's something I think that we are entitled to know. If there was a scandal that he felt he couldn't cover up or, things like that, that's obviously something that is of public interest. If it's personal and if it simply is a tragedy of a very successful man who came to Washington and couldn't, unfortunately handle the pressure, that's obviously a different matter, and we just need to be assured that it's been investigated thoroughly and independently.
David Gergen, you all do not question the public's right to know what happened, right? I mean, to get to the bottom of it. That's what there is to get to the bottom of, right?
I have no, I think the public has a right to know about everything relating to his public life, relating to his job, and relating to what he did in office. I don't think there's a question about that. To the degree that there are private issues involved here, I don't think that that's necessarily something the public needs to know. I think the privacy of an individual ought to be respected in that regard. And I frankly think there's a bright red line between those two. We in the White House have intentionally not gone and asked any doctor about anything, any pills or antidepressant drugs or anything like that he might take. We thought that was inappropriate. We thought that was an invasion of his privacy. We have not tried to go out and quiz the widow or anything like that. We have felt a responsibility, and I think we have a continuing responsibility to ensure that whatever there should be, whatever there is about his public life.
Answer. So
sure, I think that ought to be on the table. I think the public does have a right to know that.
Sure. Let's go to the budget deal. You heard what your former colleague and friend David Gergen described this budget deal from the president's point.
No, former colleague. Sorry.
Still, Brett. Sorry. Described this as a really good thing for President Clinton. Do you agree with that?
I think David is more right than he is wrong. I think that first of all, comparing Bill Clinton and what Bill Clinton is asking to what Ronald Reagan asked for in 1981 is truly, it's apples and cucumbers. It isn't even apples and oranges. I mean, Ronald Reagan in 1981 asked the American people, he asked you, Jim, he asked me, he asked Bill Kristol, he said, I'm going to ask you to do a patriotic thing. I'm going to ask you to double the defense budget. Would you do that? No, we'll do it. But if I'm going to do it, I'm going to ask you to take a 1/3 cut in taxes. Geez, I'll do it, Mr. Commander-in-Chief. I'll do it. Son of a gun, let me do it. I mean, I'll even go 40% if it'll help the country. Now, what Clinton is doing is a lot tougher.
Sure.
And it really is. And I think that every president is judged on his ability to get things through Congress. And, he's had 90% of his party with him on a tough haul. Senate Democrats have not covered themselves with glory. They have done caricatures of prima donnas, and I'd be happy to talk about that at any point. But I think that the Clinton people can feel pretty good right now.
You agree, Bill Christopher?
I think Mark's right that what Bill Clinton's doing is not like what Ronald Reagan did in 1981. What it is like is what George Bush did in 1990. And David actually made that comparison. And the Bush budget deal was not good for the Bush administration. It wasn't good for the economy. It wasn't good for the Republican Party, for that matter. And I actually think that if Bill Clinton succeeds in muscling this through next week, it will be a Pyrrhic victory for the Clinton administration.
In what way?
Well, you have a slow economy, about 1% growth over the first half, highest jobless claims for 10 months. The tax increases will not increase economic growth. President Clinton, a member of President Clinton's own Council of Economic Advisors, Alan Blinder, has been telling people that this is a contractionary package. It will slow the economy. I don't believe the deficit reduction is real. We now have evidence in the 1990 budget deal that raising rates on the wealthy does not raise revenues from the wealthy. They went down about 1% in 1991. So I think it's, Dave Gergen used the analogy of, they're at the edge of the cliff and the precipice, and I'm afraid that Clinton twists arms well enough, they'll all get in the bus and drive over. I think that what David's probably telling President Clinton privately is that he has one last chance to pull back from the precipice. And I think what would be effective now is if the president said, look, we've had this bitter partisan bickering. There's no need to pass the bill next week, and it doesn't go into effect till October 1st. Let's take 2 weeks in August and see whether we cannot work out a true bipartisan deficit reduction.
That's the boring suggestion.
It is the boring suggestion. I think he would put, frankly, as a Republican, I'll say this, he would put Republicans in a very difficult position. If he said, Bob Dole, you say that you guys really are committed to spending cuts. Well, let's get together and have deeper spending cuts than I proposed. I did what I felt was possible, but if there really is an appetite for more sacrifice out there, let's go for it. And let's go for some real economic growth, too, which I think would bring some conservative Republicans on board. And I think you should say to Ross Perot, Mr. Perot, you're out there criticizing my plan, saying you can do better. Let's get in the room for 2 weeks. Let's try it. I think, frankly, if he tries it in early September, Clinton could still pass his budget on a party line vote, but I think he would have a chance to actually produce a better document, the better budget for the economy, and frankly do a lot of damage to the Republican Party, which could not resist, I think, if the President of the United States asked, could not resist sitting down at the table to try to work out deeper spending cuts and a package that would be more conducive to economic growth, but which would cause great turmoil within Republican ranks.
Mark?
I think we've just heard the last echoes of the Reagan era. I mean, the reality is twofold, Jim. First of all, there isn't an ouchless, painless way of doing this. And that's what David Boren is holding out. It's sort of an ouchless, painless way. We can all get together and work this out. We're not going to all get together and work it out. We're not going to have a coalition government. That's not in the cards. We have accountability. For the first time in 12 years, there is accountability. It is too bad that there aren't Republicans participating, but they aren't. And I think that there were mistakes made at the outset of the Clinton administration, which probably made it easier for Republicans not to join by putting together a cabinet that reflected the Clinton coalition rather than America, not reaching out to Republicans at the time. But the reality is this. There's accountability. There's one party running the government. There's one party with responsibility for the economy. For the past 12 years, we had a quadrupling of the national debt, while each party, to its own convenience, and blithely and disingenuously pointed a finger at the other guy.
Yeah, including Democrats.
Democrats, that's right. I just think
we're,
this is crunch time, and the 2 weeks in August isn't going to do it.
Well, I actually think your statement suggests that Bill Clinton would be well advised to go for bipartisanship. As you say, the public is sick of the partisanship. He has one more chance to make up for whatever mistakes he made and to allow Republicans to make up for their early mistakes, if there were any, and go for a bipartisan deal.
Let's ask David Gergen. What is the likelihood of that happening?
Well, I think first we're going to go through a very, very hard fight.
There's going to be a vote next week.
There is going to be a vote. The president's going to take this to a vote. He wants to fight for his program. He's been fighting for it for a long time. He believes very deeply in what he's standing for. I think he's going to win. I don't think we'll ever get to the question of a bipartisan summit agreement.
But see, what Bill Kristol is suggesting is that the president not go to the vote next week. He go ahead and call this bipartisan thing before that.
I don't think the president, came all this way to throw in his hand at the last minute. I think he's going to go and fight for it and stand up for what he believes. He believes this is good for the country and good for the economy. Sure, it's tough. It's tough to break bad habits, but it's time. If this country's going to clean up its house, look, there were a lot of good things that Ronald Reagan did. I believe very strongly in the defense buildup that Ronald Reagan went through in the early 1980s. I believe he was gutsy to take on the inflation the way he did and take the recession the way he did in the early 1980s. I think he did a lot of good things. But still, at the end of the day, we still have this $4 trillion national debt, and somebody has got to cut it. Now, I think that the Clinton plan happens to be a lot better than what Bush was doing in 1990 because it's based on real numbers. The Bush plan was based on phony numbers. They kited the numbers. They said the economy was going to grow 4% a year, and that's why we were going to have all this revenue. And the economy, of course, did not grow at 4%.
Guilty
as charged. Lower than that.
Well,
you were part of that administration.
That's true. The Clinton plan projects growth. It's not going to happen either.
The Clinton plan was based on much more realistic projections, much lower projections.
It's got the same principle as the Bush plan.
I thought the Bush plan was a lousy idea.
Right. And I think it was bad for the economy, and it was bad for the Bush administration, and I think the Clinton plan will be as well.
Did Dan Quayle think it was a lousy idea?
Yes.
He did?
The difference, I think, is not only in the numbers and the projection. The ultimate test of any economic plan, right? Any tax plan. It is not a question of whether Section 104 was right and Section 211 was wrong. It's in the consequences, whether it works. Did Ronald Reagan's tax cut of 1981 work? Not for Republicans in 1982, who ran in the highest unemployment since Pearl Harbor and lost 26 seats in the House of Representatives as a consequence. Did Ronald Reagan's tax increase of 1982 work? You better sure as did. 1984, when it kicked in, he carried 49 of the 50 states. That's what Americans are very pragmatic people. We're not terribly ideological. We don't sit there and argue about how many angels there are on the head of that particular internal revenue pin. And that's the test. Whether the Clinton plan does work in 1994 and 1996 is the...
People feel you've got to give this president a chance. He got elected to try to get some things done. He wants to get this done so he can move on to health care and move on to a crime bill and move on to getting this NAFTA thing done and reinventing government. We've got a lot to do. I hope we'll be back.
Speaking of moving on, we will see you again. Thank you very much for coming back, David. Good to see you again. Mark, Bill, thank you.
Next tonight, an update on the floods in the Midwest. It's expected that by next week, Congress will have agreed on the size of its emergency relief package for the flood victims, somewhere between $3 and $5 billion. Most of the news coverage of the flood is concentrated on the people and their struggle, but there are other less publicized victims of the flood. For instance, the heart of the country's railroad system is now underwater and interstate commerce has been crippled. Elizabeth Brackett has our report.
Floodwaters have hobbled the nation's transportation system. In Kansas City, the country's second largest railroad hub, cross-country rail traffic has been virtually shut down. Nothing has moved in or out of this Union Pacific and Southern Pacific rail yard since last Monday. Rising water on the Missouri caused a quick departure from the yard's control tower.
We've got these locks open here.
Transportation Secretary Federico Pena says the entire system is in trouble.
The impact has been extraordinary and very diverse. We have had impacts on our rail system, impacts on our highway system. We have over 24 airports. These are general aviation airports that are inoperable. We have had some impacts on other transportation facilities. The barge industry is basically out of commission. And now we have had significant impacts on our interstate system. Cargo and shipment coming from the West Coast to the East Coast and also from the East Coast to the West Coast, much of it having to cross the Mississippi is now being delayed.
Railroad officials say this is the worst natural disaster they have ever experienced. Losses from freight delays and reroutes are expected to be in the millions.
This is the main line to the west for the Union Pacific and the Southern Pacific Railroad. Last Monday, the Corps of Engineers put up these floodgates when the river was rising, and nothing has moved to the west out of Kansas City since then.
Trains can't move out of the east end of the yard either. Last Sunday, the Army Corps of Engineers asked the railroad to raise their bridge over the Missouri River. Union Pacific Superintendent Steve Searle says he wasn't even sure if the old bridge would go up, but they did what the Corps asked.
Raise the bridge because when the water gets so high, the debris and drift coming down the river gets onto the bridge and starts to back up and creates a dam, and will make it go over the banks a lot quicker.
And what do you have to do to get, where the bridge is raised, what do you have to do to get it back into operation?
Well, we have to go back in there after the water goes down, so it's not hitting the bridge. We'll lower the bridge. Then we had to cut our rail in about 5 different places, and it's double track through there, so we'll have to put all that rail back together, and we'll be able to run trains.
Even if trains could leave the yard, they wouldn't get very far. 3 miles to the west, the track is underwater.
From the looks of this, and as deep as it is, we're going to be a week or better after it goes down. Maybe it'd even get back into service.
An estimated 75 miles of Union Pacific track is underwater in Missouri. Across their system, service has been interrupted on 1,700 miles of track. And Searle says there is more work once the water goes down.
If the water was running and washed the ballast and the ties out from underneath them, we'll have to go in there and put new ties and ballast and line the track, fix it back up. If the water was just standing, we'll have to go in and inspect it and see what damage there is.
You want to back him out tomorrow and bring him up the North Main and park him over?
All the water has caused a massive rerouting headache. The Union Pacific's Omaha Operations Center sounds like a war room. Since freight can't move west without a reroute, the Union Pacific, like all the other lines, has been forced to pay to use competitors' tracks. All the detours have caused at least a 3-day backup in freight nationwide. That 3-day delay is bad news for this Ford assembly plant just outside Kansas City, Missouri. Normally, the plant only has a 3-day supply of parts.
Usually 60% of the parts needed here are shipped in by rail. And when the cars are assembled, 60% are shipped out by rail. Not now.
Now, the plant has been forced to use trucks to deliver the majority of their parts. The trucks only hold a fifth as much as a rail car, and overtime costs have already soared because of longer loading and unloading time. But with only 2 weeks left in the model year, plant manager Jeff Haller says he will do whatever it takes to keep the plant open, particularly since shutting down would cost $28 million a day.
What is the most unusual way you've brought parts in so far?
Well, anywhere from the truck trailers, as you see behind us, to taxi cabs, to vans, to a van going out to an airport off a DC-10 or a small Piper Cub and throwing in by hand. We've used all those different avenues to keep the plant running over the past couple of weeks.
You're saying we'll be back open to movement and traffic and all pretty normal. What about when will we have to be back open to rail?
Well, we've got to get the water pumped off from around back, the tanks. My best guess, the way it's going now, we're looking at about 24 hours to get it pumped off. And then we're going to have to assess the condition of the tracks.
The Bartlett Grain Company has not been as fortunate as Ford. Nothing has been shipped in or out of this grain elevator for the last week. Business was already down for Bartlett, one of the 6 largest grain companies in the world. Early rain and then the flood wiped out the winter wheat harvest, and this grain elevator with a storage capacity of 11 million bushels of grain is only half full. They had to sandbag the tracks last week, ending any rail shipment, and their barge dock is underwater. Bartlett President James Hebenstreet says he hopes to get the sandbags off the tracks by Sunday, but it will be a lot longer before they ship anything by barge.
Keep hearing that if it doesn't rain another drop, and if we continue to have this pretty, particularly to us right now, hot, dry, windy weather, it would still be the 1st of September before we'd be in banks. So you've seen our river facility over here, which is under 25 feet of water. So barges are, we may be in business next week, but it won't be with barges till September.
The commodities stored in these terminals are usually shipped by barge or rail. Now the Midwest Terminal Company obviously has a whole lot of transportation troubles. The water's pressure on this terminal caused the roof to collapse. But company president John Madgett hopes the commodities stored in the rest of his buildings can be dried out and saved. Madgett knows he faces a massive cleanup job, but after that he plans to begin shipping again soon. First by truck and then by rail, when the tracks are clear. But he too expects barge shipments to be a long way off. Magid is anticipating millions of dollars in uninsured losses, but says his company will stay in business.
Our company will probably be back in business to serve the public, probably in October. Depending. It's not a good year. It is not a good year. It's not a good year for a lot of people. But considering a lot of the losses that other people have had, I feel that we're extremely lucky. We didn't lose anyone. No one got hurt.
The rivers are now dropping by about a foot a day in Kansas City. With the danger receding, the Union Pacific hopes the Army Corps will allow them to take the flood wall down this weekend. But right now, in Kansas City and much of the Midwest, the phrase, "you can't get there from here," is on a lot of people's lips.
Next tonight, we look at a medical detective story. The discovery of defects in the human gene is proceeding at an unprecedented rate. Just this year alone, scientists have identified genes responsible for Huntington's disease and colon cancer. But the most significant breakthrough is right around the corner, a gene responsible for certain breast cancers. Medical correspondent Fred DeSam Lazaro of public station KTCA reports.
Knowing the genetic basis of a disease allows doctors to go beyond early diagnosis to actually predict a disease with near certainty before it occurs.
Turn the machine to the side.
Nowhere are those benefits expected to be more immediate and widespread than with breast cancer. Scientists expect it will be the next major disease for which a gene mutation is identified. Some families involved as research subjects have gotten a foretaste of how life will change when that happens. For example, Janet and Susan, who belong to a family hard hit by breast cancer. They insisted on anonymity for this interview, worried that genetic information about them might hurt their ability to buy insurance.
The thing is we really don't even know what insurance companies would do with this information. We've been told not that we shouldn't let this information out.
Hi, Dory.
The idea that some breast cancer can be an inherited genetic disease seemed improbable when Dr. Mary Claire King began testing it 20 years ago. The disease is widespread and triggered by many environmental and dietary factors, making it difficult to track down any genetic predisposition. But as a self-described radical feminist, Dr. King persisted, driven as much by political zeal as scientific intuition.
All of breast cancer is caused by changes in genes. Are there some women for whom those changes in genes are inherited? Almost everybody was very skeptical about it. So was I. And I persisted with this problem because it's an enormously important problem for women.
King began the task of hunting down a single culprit gene from among the 100,000 in the human genome. These pieces of DNA protein lie on 23 pairs of chromosomes, and they account for all aspects of life. Similarly, all cancers are caused when a gene is defective or mutated, something that can be triggered either by heredity or by environmental factors.
Her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer at 46 and died.
Dr. King's lab examined DNA samples from several generations in hundreds of families, trying to track down any pattern peculiar to those members who got the cancer. This would point to an inherited defect, yet none was evident.
Many of them, of course, are families in which several women have had breast cancer coincidentally because breast cancer is so common. So we decided to focus on families where many women had had breast cancer very young.
She had breast cancer first at 29 and then again at 39.
Breast cancer usually strikes women in their 50s, so through her research, King was intrigued by the younger premenopausal patients. Although they make up only about 5 to 10% of all her subjects, it was in this group that King's lab got its breakthrough. These women had a distinct marker on their 17th chromosome, a genetic road sign indicating that a gene responsible for breast cancer was nearby. The marker was not present in family members who did not get breast cancer.
I remember hearing about that result at a genetics meeting in Cincinnati in 1989, and it was really quite electrifying.
Michigan geneticist Dr. Francis Collins himself became famous in 1989 for discovering the gene responsible for cystic fibrosis. He says finding the breast cancer marker was a daunting task.
The scale of the problem is similar to trying to find a single burned-out light bulb in a closet in somebody's basement somewhere in the U.S. without having any clue what state to look in, much less what town or what house. You could say that putting the gene on chromosome 17 was like getting it in the right state. Say, well, okay, it's in the state of Vermont. Finding that it was close to this marker that she identified narrowed it down to perhaps 10% of that chromosome, so saying you're in the right county.
Collins joined forces with King and with several other laboratories also in pursuit. They predict the actual breast cancer gene will be found by the end of 1993. Identifying the so-called breast cancer gene will give doctors the ability to screen women who are at risk. A straightforward DNA test will tell if a woman has the mutation. If she does, there's an 85% chance she'll get breast cancer before menopause.
You're basically sort of sitting in front of somebody with a crystal ball saying, we know what's going to happen to you.
Michigan oncologist Dr. Barbara Weber enjoys that diagnostic prowess already with some of her patients who are studied in Dr. Collins' lab next door. Because these families' DNA has been studied so extensively, doctors are already able to diagnose the presence of the breast cancer gene in research families.
And you feel like it's a science fiction movie or something. I mean, you just don't feel like it's real what they're telling you.
Susan was certain it was just a matter of time before she would get the breast cancer that hit her mother, 2 cousins, and 2 sisters. She decided late last year to have her breasts removed as a precaution.
When my second sister developed breast cancer, I just felt like this clock was ticking, and I was going to have cancer any time, and I was just hoping I could get in and have my breast taken off before I developed cancer.
But 10 days before her surgery, Susan accompanied her ailing sister Janet to a visit with oncologist Dr. Weber. She told Dr. Weber of her plans for the preventative surgery.
We had actually just finished studying that branch of the family, and I knew with reasonable certainty that she was unlikely to be a carrier of this gene mutation.
We looked at the data. It was clear that this young woman had not inherited the at-risk part of chromosome 17. Therefore, her risk of getting breast cancer was no greater than the general population. And yet she was about to undergo this very aggressive procedure. And therefore, still without having designed much of a protocol of how we were going to do this, we felt obligated to share that information with her.
It was unbelievable. I wanted to believe it, but part of me thought it was too good to be true.
Susan looked at me, and I looked at her, and we just started crying right then. It was like finally something was going right.
Young women like Janet and Susan who are in the high-risk group will clearly benefit soonest from the discovery of the breast cancer gene. They account for only 5 to 10% of all breast cancers, yet doctors say studying the gene will offer new insights into the other 90%.
This was not noticeable on self-examination.
Doctors suspect the gene is also altered if non-inherited breast cancer strikes. Catching these changes right when they occur at this molecular level means a much earlier diagnosis.
If you have a mammogram now, and it's a very good mammogram, you can pick up a breast tumor when it's maybe this big as my little finger. We'd like to be able to back up the cell division stage at which we can pick up that lump, so that we can pick it up way before you could see it as a physical entity on a mammogram. One could go in, remove those lesions with the simplest possible surgery, and the woman goes on about her life.
King cautions that any such breakthroughs will take years of studying the breast cancer gene. More immediately, doctors expect a beeline for tests that would screen for the inherited breast cancer.
We estimate that there's probably more than 500,000 women in the United States that carry this gene mutation, and many, many more than that are going to want to be tested to see if they carry the gene mutation.
In Janet and Susan's family, everyone over 18 has been screened and told of their status. Because Susan does not have the mutation, her 10-year-old daughter is assured she doesn't either.
She was very concerned about developing. She did not want to develop, so it was a big relief for her, and that she doesn't have that concern.
Janet's 18-year-old daughter, however, learned she does carry the genetic mutation, meaning she'll likely get breast cancer and also ovarian cancer, which often hits in families genetically predisposed to breast cancer.
I know she felt a sense of loss. My, of course, first reaction was a tremendous feeling of guilt and anger.
I think it was worse knowing that she had the gene than it was for me to know that I had cancer myself.
Still, Janet admits the information allows her daughter some time to plan, which she herself did not have.
And I can see her saying, I'm going to have my children before I'm 25 because I want to breastfeed them. I'm going to have them because I don't want to have ovarian surgery and not be able to have any children. So it does kind of make you feel like you've got to hurry up and do all these things so that you can enjoy your life like everyone else has the opportunity to do. I feel very fortunate that she has the information, that she's not going to have to be faced with breast cancer. Hopefully that she will have a surgery before anything happens.
Such preventative steps are likely the best patients can expect for some years. The lack of a treatment or cure for the mutations that are being discovered remains a torment for doctors. Yet Dr. Mary Claire King says a lifelong goal, which seemed a pipe dream just a few years ago, is well within reach.
I want that by the end of my career, that breast cancer not be a cause of death in women, that it be detectable early enough using molecular genetics that women don't die of it. Not that we don't ever develop malignant breast cells, but that they don't kill us. That's what I want.
Again, the major stories of this Friday: congressional negotiators neared agreement on a budget plan that would raise gasoline taxes by 4.3 cents a gallon. On the NewsHour this evening, White House Counselor David Gergen said it's conceivable that the democratically controlled Senate could still reject the scheme. The warring parties in Bosnia agreed on the plan to split the republic into 3 separate states, and Israel's bombardment of southern Lebanon continued for a 6th consecutive day. Good night, Jim.
Good night, Roger. We'll see you Monday night. Have a nice weekend. I'm Jim Lehrer. Thank you and good night.
New York Life is proud to